As I said, with regard to this, one of the institutes of divine establishment is a national entity under which people live. Now, every national entity has believers. Every national entity presents its challenges, its difficulties to believers. There are other national entities that would be considered client nations. Now, a client nation is different than a so-called Christian nation or covenant nation. There is no such thing as a Christian nation unless you have all Christians in it. And of course, in the dispensation of grace, there will never be any time when there will be one nation that has all believers. Of course, we're studying this at the end of the tribulation period, right at the beginning of the kingdom. The kingdom starts with all believers. So you have a covenant nation there, Israel, that will have all believers, and all Gentiles that are saved will start their Gentile nations at that time. There's no such thing as a Christian nation. And in the dispensation of grace, there's no such thing as a covenant nation. That's what Romans 11 is all about. Paul says Israel's been cut off from the place of blessing. She will be grafted back into the plan of God again. Yes, that's true. But she is out as far as a covenant nation is concerned. And so therefore, the nation that is really one that glorifies God is one who promotes maximum freedom. We have freedom to take it to the potential of righteousness in any believer in any generation, or we must also allow the freedom to go the other direction. And I hope you understand that whenever I talk about the fact that we are not trying to Christianize America. We are trying to evangelize America, but we realize under other laws like volitional responsibility that a person's will must be free to express itself without coercion. And so that's why we temper our statement, we temper our worldview, we temper what we want to make of America in keeping with all of these other principles and precepts. We mentioned the fact of boycotting like Walt Disney, and I understand the intent. I think personally that as believers we ought to not support something like what they're doing down there per se. However, with regard to the open expression that of homosexuality, however, if the nation is going to be free, we've got to be very, very careful with regard to this. We don't want it. No, we'd vote against it. But remember, if we're going to be free, majority rules in a lot of cases. And what if, as in the case of Sodom and Gomorrah, what if that happens? Well, here's what's going to happen. God is going to judge America as he judged Sodom and Gomorrah, but what did he do to righteous Lot? He moved righteous Lot out. What is he going to do to us? We're going to check out and let the judgment fall as we're going up. That's fine with me. So we do have to watch that. Now, again, personally or as a congregation, we're not going to have Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck come up here and quack, quack, and squeak in order to get, because that associates, fine. But this is our domain. This is our business. This is where our jurisdiction lies. But I don't have any jurisdiction over Walt Disney World or so forth. And one of the things that you do have to be careful with, if the Southern Baptists have to do this too. Okay, let's boycott them. All right. So what's the next thing that comes along? We've got to have a little witch hunt. Going all the way back to Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, that's Disney, Pocahontas. I wonder how many of the children and grandchildren of those people in there are going to have Pocahontas. What's Pocahontas? Well, it's a gal that says all white men who are capitalists are wrong and who speaks to spirits in the trees and speaks to nature. Oh, wait 1 second. I mean, that's sheer demonism through and through. All right? Out with that. The same thing with Beauty and the Beast. What does that? Takes us right back to Nephilim, where a beautiful woman kisses a beast and mates with him. That's out with that. Now, again, on a personal basis, perhaps we better take a look at these various things with regard to what we watch and support. But again, who's going to enforce this? Is everybody in the leadership of the Southern Baptist Church going to go through every home of one of their members and say, well, now, wait one second, this smacks of Walt Disney? No, they've got to police that on their own. You teach the doctrine, and because of volition, you allow people to go rise and fall. And, here I am saying this. I mean, we'd have to go all the way back. Please excuse this. Please forgive me. But even Bambi is a new age environmentalist film. Even Bambi is. You say, oh, we don't shoot the deer in the forest, and he lost his mommy and his daddy. Well, did it ever occur to you that hamburger at one time had a mommy and a daddy? We don't ever get upset about that beef that we eat. It was just that lovely little deer. Now, I'm not much of a hunter, but you've got to take those things into consideration. Why? Because we end up condemning ourselves in the things that we allow. And it is really hard, as a pastor, all these years of letting the right hand and the left hand be balanced, so that when we do have this approach and understanding, that personally we understand it. However, if you see a Disney film, and a person says, well, it's one of these type deals, that gets into legalism. Witch hunts get into legalism. I don't believe that someone else has the right to poke their big nose into your home and into your business, on all cases. It's one thing about, like I said, a church bringing that in, then you come under the auspices of another authority. And the authority can say, whoa, we don't do that here. But I don't want Disney telling me what to do here. And I don't think we should tell Disney what to do, except personally, as believers, we say, I'm not going to take part in that sort of thing. Because it's going to end up end up in a war, a religious war. That's exactly where we're heading, actually. What's going to happen is with regard to the various factions. But as it stands right now, the only thing we can have and only thing we can do is fight with the truth. I don't think we'll ever have enough money to advertise like Walt Disney. I don't think, how are we going to ever do that? How are we going to ever fight that when the majority of our neighbors want to see that stuff anyway? When the majority of the nation, well, what are you saying, Pastor? What I'm saying is this: keeping them from Walt Disney does not save them. And shutting down Walt Disney, though I wish it would, shutting it down does not change the fact that those people who go there or work there, it's not going to change their heart. They're still going to practice their relationships one way or the other. And that is exactly what is happening. If you're going to make a nation a Christian nation, you've got to make it Christian across the board. And that would be fine. Because the first guy I'd shut down is the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, who doesn't teach the truth about where the church starts, about water baptism, about the Great Commission, and a whole lot of other things. The legalism, and I've been there. The first thing I thought that I would, and I've told this before, that I was spiritual if I didn't go to movies. If I just didn't go to movies, I was spiritual. That's what they taught in an independent, which broke from the Southern Baptist Convention over several doctrinal issues. That's what I thought. And women, if you wore makeup, God forbid, you were unspiritual. If you wore Bermuda shorts, you were going to hell. The lowest part of hell was reserved for you in a Southern Baptist church. I've been in Southern Baptist churches as an evangelist there, and the pastor would literally chase people around after the service that he knew smoked a cigarette to in an attempt to, come on, you're the, and I would think to myself, now wait one second. Lying and greed and all these other things but if they just don't do this, well, that's going to make them spiritual. And I began formulating my doctrine early on in recognizing the fact that many of those things are incidental non-issues. So what? But the weightier issues are the things that are important. And they majored on minor things, and it didn't make a difference. So, with regard to being a nation, what preserves a nation? Two things. One, we've already... Did I miss something? That's right. That's right. Have jewelry, having brown hair by nature, and another color by proxy. No, hey, listen, that's right. They hit the whole gamut. If you came in and you spruced up just a little bit, I'm telling you, they would label you streetwalker. Oh man, that's the way it was. And I realized soon enough that's absolutely not true. I'll tell this. It's going to be on tape, but I don't care. Debbie Harrington last night asked us to her home there for some fellowship with about 8 people, some new ones. We saw Virgil, who came to church here one time, and so forth. Now, mind you, my personal stance here with regard to alcohol is I do not believe that drunkenness is right. However, a glass of wine or even something stronger is not necessarily wrong as long as you keep it in its place. You see, if you were in a Baptist church right now, I would be defrocked, deordained. I would be out that door and just saying something like, don't you touch alcohol, and it would, and I don't believe that. I believe the Bible talks about wine and strong drink in excess being wrong, but you can have it. Of course, when we got there, Debbie Harrington was serving what you call a fuzzy navel in mason jars. and after about 2 of them, she wanted me to pray. It's about like our Heavenly Father. Thee thank we, goodness, whatever. But then it got funny, and I won't tell this. But Jay bought pork butt and had it in sauce there. And after about 2.5 of these, the lady down from the bar, and it was a food bar. The food bar. She, without thinking, said, "Well, Jay, I like your butt." So, and then Debbie put some that were unbarbecued into the barbecue sauce, and Jay's butt got put in there. Well, anyway, it was a happy time. But what I'm saying is, there are some people who are so legalistic that would say, you just can't do that. And that is not true. You just cannot be drunk. And although I did praise the Lord afterwards that I didn't get pulled over because of my blood alcohol level. No, that's not true. I didn't have that much. I'm just joking. And because some people get a little uptight and serious. I'm just joking. I would not do that. I made it home, but I don't remember. Give me another one of those mason jars. No, it wasn't like that. That's a very good time. I said all that to say that you have to watch legalism. And you have to make things consistent, but also you cannot get all uptight if a person breaks the rule. You forgive, you want to help, and so forth. If there is a violation. Now, however, there are some things that are more important and more stringent, and that is both the structure and the authorities factor set up here in the Institutes of Divine Establishment. And we're at a point today where we're beginning to break these things. For example, I think the people we have in our nation now are socialistic, who would be lean toward communism, who would be shades of pink in their political viewpoint. Now, that is wrong. Why is that wrong? Because when you get into those types of political viewpoints, you begin taking away freedom from people. Freedom to succeed, freedom to fail based on their own volition. And of course, I could never, excuse the phrase, preach this at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. right now, simply because the man there does not believe that. And he is beginning to change the United States of America, at least they want to. And that is what we've been talking about with regard to a church. It becomes wrong when people begin changing things, taking the way God has instructed a thing to be, it structured it, designed it with its authorities and so forth, and making it different. That's why, of course, and we've already read this in our responsive reading, Romans chapter 13. In every one of these institutes that are founded not by man, but actually by God in His Word, there is not only a structure, but there is an appointed authority. Verse 1 of Romans 13. Let every soul be subject to the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. When we come to these institutes, we come to something that God Himself says that we ought to have. The regulation, the orderly organization of all men should come around this matter of the divine institutes. Whosoever resists the power, resists the ordinance of God. That's why whether it's family, marriage, business, school, military, a nation, or a church, that's why we should stand up and say, wait 1 second. I mean, that might be your church, and we live in a nation where you're free to be what you want. But God does not allow us to be free in the sense that we are not responsible for our thinking and decisions. If we change the truth to a lie, we are culpable. And that's what it's saying here. If you resist the power, you resist the ordinance of God. It's the way God designed things to be. We always talk about the will of God as though, does He want me to go to Africa as a missionary? Well, I'll tell you, I'm not sure if He wants that or not, but I can tell you what His will is, and that is to conform to the Institutes of Divine Establishment. That's one of the aspects of His will for you. All right? They that resist receive to themselves damnation. And that's the whole point. We ourselves, like Noah, like Lot, and the rest, we warn the world, we condemn the world, we tell them what's happening because of their sin and error. Where we can, we can regulate, but where not, we maintain a non-legalistic thing. We're going to keep ourselves right. We're going to keep our freedom. You do what you want, but please be warned. There's hell to pay at the end, and that's what it's saying here. For rulers are not a terror to good work, but to the evil. Will you not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and you will have praise of the same. And so we find one of the very first principles of obedience. When we obey God, He says, well done, thou good and faithful servant. When our children obey us, we say, well done, you did a good job and deserving of praise. When we're good citizens, a legitimate ruler can say, well done, you'll have praise of the same. Verse 4, for He is the minister of God to thee for good. Even unsaved people are in the ministry. Even unsaved people are ordained in the sense that they keep the structure. They keep law and order. They allow things to be done decently and in order. They preserve our freedoms. But if you do that which is evil, be afraid, for He bears not the sword in vain. He is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that does evil. Now, you're going to say, as in the case of Disney, Well, what about where you get law enforcement people who are on the side of other people who are corrupting things? Well, there's the case of Noah and the ark, Pharaoh in Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea. There's the case of Lot and Sodom. If it comes where those who should be enforcing principles of freedom in a nation or across the board become corrupt themselves, then that's when you move out of the way and you let God's judgment fall. Now, sometimes he uses other nations. Why do you think Japan got not one, but 2 A-bombs dropped on them? Because they were trying to come to the United States of America and make you speak Japanese when you were born, to make you worship your ancestors and worship your emperor. Now, that was right during the time when we had the modernist fundamentalist battles, and guess who was winning those battles? The fundamentalists at that time. That was the era of when the grace movement was being born and other fundamentalist movement. And there were large churches who all believed very much like we do today. Now, they're pretty much gone now, as we say, the way of the dodo. But at that time, positive volition was in the United States of America. What happened to Japan? Poof, and you're gone in a split second. That's what happened to Japan. What happened to Germany? Why did Hitler have to shoot himself? The very same reason. But, and we had Zed Ferries to say it this morning, if our law enforcement officials join people just like Disney, what's that going to mean for America? It means that God works all things together for good. He knows how to, well, let's read it here. It's back in 1 Peter. 2 Peter. 2 Peter. Verse number 4. The angels came down. The 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. Angels came down to protect the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. In doing, they decided they were going to mate with the women. God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, delivered them to chains of darkness to be reserved to judgment. You see, here was Noah and other believers at that time. They stayed true, and here were these angels about to, and they were definitely tougher than the rest. The Nephilim were definitely tougher. They began taking over the world. The world is filled with violence. What's that mean? It means that might was right. The strongest was going to rule, and all humanity was going to be snuffed out. So the angels he took and put them into hell. He spared not the old world, but saved Noah, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. He saved Noah, but he destroyed the world, turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them with an overflow, making them an example to those that are going to live ungodly in that fashion. But what did he do to Lot? Same thing he did to Noah. He delivered just Lot. Verse 8, that righteous man dwelling among them and seeing and hearing vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. But what did he do? He took Lot out and he brought judgment upon them, because the Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptations, but to reserve the unjust to the day of judgment to be punished. So as we close this time together, we would say we absolutely, positively love America. We appreciate everything about America, except sometimes about the way the trends and things that are going. What do we need to do to preserve America? And I said 2 things, and I'll be done. The first thing is freedom is always won on a battlefield or with a prepared military. Always. Why do you think Christ is called the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel? the leader of the armies. Michael and his angels in military rank and formation fought against the dragon and his angels and kicked them out of heaven. Why? There would be no peace in heaven as long as Lucifer was there. He had to kick him out. He had to incarcerate him. The second way a nation is preserved is by people just like you who are positive to Bible doctrine. God will keep our shores free as long as the pivot of believers is big enough to justify sustaining that nation so that you and I might either be saved or come to Christian maturity. Quick illustration in reverse concerning Jesus Christ. You see, I first said military, which means shots have to be fired sometimes, and then church, which means, hopefully no one's going to bring their M16 here, and so forth. But we preserve our nation without a shot being fired. Let's reverse it in the case of Jesus Christ and the cross. He won the strategic victory of the angelic conflict. Jesus Christ did without firing a shot, but he won it. How? Because he did the will of God and died it perfectly fulfilled the will of the Father. But when he comes back, what does he come on? Leading the armies of heaven on a white stallion with a sword proceeding out of his mouth. Why does he have to do that? Because freedom is won by military victory.